Welcome to Questions and Conversations on Leadership in Life. On this episode, we explore the transformative power of communication styles in leadership, exploring the difference between advocacy and inquiry, and how shifting from stating your case to asking questions can unlock authentic dialogue, foster psychological safety, and drive real change in teams, organizations, and mainly in life. Join us as we reflect on it.
Welcome to another episode of Questions and Conversations on Leadership and Life. And I'm Steve.
And I'm Poli. So good to be
Oh,
here. So, what
hi.
are we cooking today?
Well, I'm really looking forward to this episode, and it was prompted by real life events over the last week. And let me just start with the context that on leadership and life, and leadership is not a role, it's not a title, it's not a position, it's not an assigned parking space. It's none of those. Leadership is about influence. And by influence, when Polly and I talk about influence, we're talking about our ability to influence ourselves in how we show up and who we choose to be, how we can choose to pause, notice, and choose. So it's about influence over us, but also it's about our ability to influence others. Okay, so I think that context is helpful. Um, and where I'm excited about going today, I just reread this book. I'll hold it up first and I'll show something, but it's The Advantage by Patrick Lencioni. And in it, he talks about communication, and he talks about both two communication styles. One is of advocacy, and one is of inquiry. And of course, when Polly and I talk about leadership and the things we find is we often use the term appreciative inquiry, but either way, it's inquiry. And I thought it might be helpful. He crafted those definitions so well in his book. I'm just going to flip my camera and show those, and I'll read them. And now, here we go. Okay, well, I love these definitions. This is on page 22 of the book, The Advantage. And Patrick defines advocacy is the kind of communication that most of us are accustomed to. It's all about stating your case or making your point. And he gives this nice example. An example of advocacy was, I think we should change our advertising approach. Or another example, I recommend that we cut costs. So it's a one-way communication. You're advocating for your point of view, your opinion. And the contrast to that is inquiry. Inquiry is a rarer and more important than advocacy. It happens when people ask, get this, Polly, ask questions and seek clarity about another person's statement of advocacy. So, examples, why do you think the advertising approach is wrong? And which aspects of it are you referring to? Or another example, what evidence do you have that our expenses are too high, and how certain of you are that? So, bringing inquiry in response to someone or something advocating for a point of view or a position. And I'm going to switch cameras again and just give everybody another second to kind of capture that as they see it on the screen. And before I go on, Polly, I would love to hear what those two definitions stirred up in you, or what your thoughts are around those.
It really feels the first, I'm imposing, the second, I'm opening doors for communicate, for real communication.
Oh, I love the choice of real communication.
And opening in terms of, I want to understand more. I'm curious to know where you are coming from. And yes, let's listen to it carefully. And if we get to common ground, even If it's not 100% my side, 100% your side, let's do it. Let's roll with that. And I also believe from the one of the texts we had on exchange this week, I guess, from Stephanie, in talking about how we can also have the appreciative inquiry, bringing the inquiry to the conversation and bringing enrollment to it also.
Enrollment. Okay.
Yes. So you are
Yes.
expanding the view. So it's not my point of view, your point of view. No, let's expand our point of view and let's dig deeper with questioning and not with punches or not
Yes.
with the frown faces because my idea was not taken for
Yeah.
granted. Yeah.
Or you were approaching it like a competition, because I've fallen into that trap before too. I'm looking at this, I want to bring my voice in, and I'm looking what I change it. Well, it's not a competition. You see what I'm saying? The other thing that
Yeah.
what you brought up is kind of one of my teachers kind of explained the difference between a discussion, which rhymes with percussion, which involves banging ideas against the wall, versus a dialogue. And I'm not a linguist, but he explained that dialogue, whatever the root or language that it's from, really means to weave in and out, which is the inquiry part. So are we having a
Exactly.
discussion? Or are we having engaging in a dialogue? Which discussion would be more advocacy, and dialogue would be the inquiry approach.
Yeah.
And so
The real
that brings us
conversation.
to what I suggest we do today, or what I'm inspired to do today, is um, let's play with this question. I'll read one, and I think you have another version of it. And let's get this question. I'd like to throw this question out to both you and I and to our listeners. And then I'm going to bring back in something that just happened in the last 5 days, where someone took this concept and it had just like transformative results to a conversation. So I think this real life example that just happened within the last few days, shared with me by a dear friend of mine, would be helpful to our audience. How does that
Yeah,
sound for
that's
the way to craft today's episode?
I will go with that, but and I can tell you I'm already curious to know how you came up with all this. But I'll
My
wait to the
story, after we
yeah,
reflect, I think
yes.
will be
Match.
what that magic light bulb that I was inspired to share with you and then share with our listeners this morning. So, one version of the question that I've written down is, when has my communication or leadership style, impacted my ability to invite others into an inquiry style of communication? When has my communication or leadership style impacted my ability to engage in that dialogue versus a discussion?
Mm.
And there might be a slightly different wording version of that maybe that will land better. Do you want to read that, and then we can between those two, we'll have a nice question foundation for to give people a period of reflection.
Yeah, and it's interesting because the other question we have, it really brings like I'm not saying, I'm just reading it.
Okay.
I'm just saying, let's see, let's see what the audience thinks, and then I can bring my also what I'm
Okay.
thinking from the
Very
two
good.
questions we have.
Yeah.
So, what is it about my communication style that is causing me to believe that the conversation is not worth uh, going on, having is not worth having because the other person or the person from the team is stubborn, just won't listen, and then we have a frown face.
Okay. So that's kind of one of avoidance, because you've already made up your mind, or the team members have. Why I think the terms, it's not worth having. You're just beating your head against the wall. Nothing's going to change. And
Yeah.
so a couple ways to think about, but the main point is remember, leadership is about our ability to influence both ourselves and others, and especially ourselves, how we choose to be, how we show up in the room. And I believe
Exactly.
you had another thought just hanging out there before you read that question. Is that still
Yeah.
with you that you'd like to share?
Yeah, it is so interesting because it really depends on our point of view also to ourselves. I can't keep on thinking of the first question that we texted back and forth, and the second question that you brought. Um, it is so interesting to think. Do I choose to see through the lenses of, yeah, I don't want to talk to anybody because it's not worth talking. So
Hmm.
let me build the wall here and stay away. I'm not going back to that. Or am I seeing through the lenses of, I am an influencer, I am a leader, even if I don't carry the title of,
Hmm.
but I choose to bring this question in a way that it can open a conversation.
Yes, yes. And you just reminded me, I believe this quote would be attributable to Tim Ferriss, and with apologies because I won't get it exactly right, but his quote is, the quality and happiness in our life is directly related to the number of difficult conversations we are willing or we choose to engage in. So by not engaging in those conversations, I'm beating my head against them. You know how many in both our real lives and the corporate world or the nonprofit world, how many ideas don't move forward because of this belief? We talked about belief windows. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's what we're weaving in and out of today. And if you have anything else, bring it in. Otherwise, I think we should take 3 to 4 minutes to give our listeners a time to reflect. And then, Polly, I would like to start with maybe hearing from you with what your reflection was. And then I'll bring this story that really was the inspiration for today's podcast into the episode to wrap things up. How does that sound to you?
Sounds good. Sounds good. Let's give ourselves some minutes here. Three
Okay.
minutes ish.
Yeah, three,
Three
three to
minutes
four.
ish.
Three's good.
Capture the
I
first
always
thing.
suggest four, and you always bring it back to three. So maybe someday we'll just say 3.5. But how about whatever you choose? You've got the. What do you think, Polly? What do you think we should do?
Oh, that's good. You see, now he's turning the question to me, giving me the power to say, okay, maybe I can find something that is longer and go into 3.5. That's why I said three-ish.
Okay. Well, you're
But
you're
let's
the
go with the
you.
question. Let's go with the question, the second question, which is actually I'm saying second question because of the first one that we had on our text messages, and the second one is the one that you brought now.
Okay.
So let's go with the one you brought.
Okay, and I'll just repeat
How
that.
our yes.
When is my communication or leadership style impacted my ability to invite others into an inquiry style of conversation? And maybe the subtext to that is a little bit of the other question is, and when have I not done that because um, I had already formed an image that the other person's too stubborn or the other team's too stubborn, not willing to listen. I'm beating my head against the wall. So let's reflect on that, and looking forward to hearing what your reflections are, and then I'll bring my story in.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Gonna push the play button here and let's roll with that.
Okay. welcome back. Your song and timing selection was perfect, Polly. So once again, the magician behind the music and the reflection time has done a marvelous job. And as we discussed, I am really interested to hear your thoughts on what our enrollment into the question and the question itself brought up for you.
It is quite interesting because it didn't actually bring me to one moment of where I could. It brought me to a few moments, but connected to these moments, it also brought me to thinking of generational changes or differences in how many of us or a lot of us were brought up in terms of you don't ask, you just do. And breaking that cycle of you don't ask, you just do, or you just take it the way it is, that is just so, it's quite an interesting journey depending on who you are working with. And it really takes on you who are more open or have the awareness of the moment to bring a question in a way that the other person does not feel cornered or scolded. It was so interesting where my mind went this time.
Well, what else? Because before I jump in here, because I'm ready to go. Because what you said was like, and we didn't rehearse this. What Polly just reflected on is the exact example that's happening in this story I'm about to tell. This
Wow.
series of real life events that happened within the last 5 days of recording this podcast. So, what is there anything
Oh,
else you'd like to bring out?
I, that is just interesting. And then I was looking at my mural of a post-its. I can even just
Yeah, yeah,
glance
yeah.
people.
Polly,
Yeah.
the post-it master.
Yes. And there is one that it's maybe it's a way for us to start working the questions ourselves is to reframe our minds by changing the questions we
Yeah,
ask. So then when we are asked by others, it doesn't feel so intriguing or so,
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
In modeling that,
It's,
it's not that advocacy is wrong. It's that advocacy without space for inquiry is a dysfunctional team in Patrick Lencioni's language. And so, Polly, I can bring in the story now of this example. And it's so interesting to me that some of the things you said, like we've just been programmed to don't ask. And then some of the awareness, which we talked about, you use that word, and then the example that leads right into the story. So here's the so in talking um, with my dear friend, the conversation was going. She was just curious about, well, what's this facilitation stuff you're talking about? And
uh,
so I was just sharing examples of how you and I, Polly and I, are a good facilitator will use inquiry to unlock those voices, to invite more of the voices of people sitting around the table into the room. And how you really can't walk into a room and just say, well, this is a psychologically safe space. Everybody feel free to speak up. That doesn't create psychological safety, but our influence and the way we show up and the way we, even if we're not the person facilitating, how we can still facilitate that conversation. So within a day or two of having that conversation, we were visiting again, and she shared back that, oh my gosh, I took some of what you said, and it and here's what happened. So they were having a she had an idea for this whether it was a problem or issue, that's not relevant, but for this thing they were looking at, that a decision needed to be made. And she shared it with one of her teammates and kind of got the response, well, good luck with that. That's just not gonna land anywhere. But she stuck with it. And she went to this individual as they started to address this with her idea, but she started by just kind of reviewing the facts that they were looking at. And then she started the conversation by, what do you think, Polly? So she teed
One little
up
thing.
that other person the chance to bring advocacy in. Okay. And then she listened. I imagine she reflected back, but then that he actually asked her what she thought, which is like, where did that come from? Well, it comes from, you know,
You just modeled.
from the behind the scenes stuff, the secret sauce. So that opened up him asking the question. And here's what I thought was just really magical on her part. She shared, but something in her instincts, just working with this person for so long, was like, I'm not sure that they heard me, or perhaps they didn't understand what I was trying to convey. And here's the second inquiry that she came up with on her own, just as a result of our conversation. I know that this was not a specific thing that I had shared, but she asked, Polly, could you please repeat back what you believe you understood I was saying?
Oh, that's awesome.
Could you
That's
please repeat
awesome.
back or reflect back how you heard me, what you understood me to be communicating? Which he did. And then it was, well, that's close, but let me, whatever her words were, let me refine the point. Here's a point that, anyway, that brought in another inquiry question that they reflected on. And they went, what was going to be, don't even bother having the conversation, went to that other person saying, let's go with that.
Okay.
Just
Because
that
then
in,
they were more open to
yeah,
really
yeah.
discuss. It was not, it's just coming, I have to accept it.
Yes, and what I was just what inspired this and made me pull out that book, The Advantage, again, is it just reminded me of those pages. But for our listeners, and the point of today's episode is, what is it about my leadership style, my communication style,
Hmm.
that is preventing a spirit of inquiry and keeping the team or the conversation only going advocacy back and forth? And I thought those were just two really um, nice examples. And that conversation happened because she took what she heard
And practice,
and made it her
put into
own, but
practice.
really took the inquiry piece of it and crafted something. And again, ask for an opinion. Whenever we acknowledge that, Polly, I heard what you said. That's changing my perspective on this. It created a cycle of giving and receiving in that conversation and led to a decision that was different than what the person had been advocating for the day before or that morning or whatever that time period was.
And observing this story, it takes courage to change, to step up. And it's really being in alignment to your values, what you want to bring out into the world, that you step forward with the courage. You don't know what it's going to happen. It's the unknown right there. But I am opening myself to model this and get with the other one so we can dance together. Because it's a dance when you have a question, an answer, and then you go a little bit further and you are moving. There is a movement.
It's a tango.
Yes, it
Yeah.
is.
I
It
threw that in
is.
there because I think that dance originated in your on or near your space in Brazil. So in any
Oh yeah,
event, yeah, it
it's
is
in
like a dance.
Argentina.
It's that
Yeah.
dialogue. It's the
Yeah, it is.
dialogue versus a discussion. And maybe the final point for our listeners, and really this is how this podcast was birthed, is Polly and I were not having questions and answer sessions. We just kept getting in
Mm-hmm.
these breakout rooms, and the questions and conversations that were happening in there We felt,
We're like, no, well, we
yeah,
needed to bring this out.
yeah.
It's
So,
not just
but
for
it's questions
us.
and conversation and that spirit of inquiry. And that's the point of today's episode, is we
That's
have the
great.
ability to influence how we choose to show up, to just add, you can create a cycle of advocacy back and forth, or you can open the door,
Mm-hmm.
like in the story I shared with you
Mm-hmm.
today.
And it is amazing. Yeah. Yes.
So,
Let's keep on opening doors,
yeah, yeah,
allowing ourselves to do so. That's
yeah,
great.
and I learned that the start of that question, I think, is so powerful. What is it about my communication style? Instead of the conversation be what everybody doesn't, nobody, they don't listen. There's too strong-minded. No, what is it about my communication
If
style? Or
I am the
what is it
one,
about the way I am showing up that could be maybe not causing that, but supporting that behavior or that event.
absolutely,
So this has
absolutely.
been once again, Polly. These conversations are so enjoyable because you and I throw ideas out, and through the
And
power
they
of questions and conversations,
and we
we
grow.
have it.
We also grow by either revisiting a question or having a new question or a theme that pops up. We grow with that.
Okay. Well, today I would like you to give any if you're willing, and to put a period on this episode. Why don't you, Claude, with our concluding remarks and then our closure, please.
Be you. Simply be you and take the change from you into the world. Do not expect the others. Once you have the awareness of it, you cannot just say that it's not there. You cannot not do.
You cannot not influence. You cannot not have influence, as Dr. Danny Fridlin would
Exactly.
say.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So go out and do you.
Yeah.
And by
Well,
doing you, you are modeling into the world.
yeah. Well, thank you for those closing reflections. And this has been another episode of Questions and Conversations on Leadership and Life. And I'm Steve.
And I'm Polly. And
And make it a great day. Make it a
I
great
love
day,
that.
everybody.
We are
Okay.
the ones who make it great. So thank you
Okay.
for saying that, Steve.
Okay.
Yes. See you next.
See you next time.
Thank you for joining us for this insightful conversation on leadership, influence, and the art of inquiry. Real change begins with how you choose to show up and the questions you ask. We hope today's reflections inspire you to open more doors, embrace courageous conversations, and keep growing. Until next time, make it a great day because you are the one who makes it great. We'd love to hear from you. What stood out from this episode? Share with us in the comments. Subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast, leave us a review, and share this episode with someone you know is navigating their own inner questions. Questions and Conversations on Leadership in Life is hosted by Poli Wilson and Steve Campana. Produced by Poli Wilson. Music copyright by freetouse.com.